May 28, 1940, Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring tossed aside an intelligence report with open disdain. The document described President Roosevelt's appeal to Congress for an unprecedented expansion of aircraft production, 50,000 planes annually. The Americans are desperate if they think such propaganda will intimidate us. Göring sneered to his staff. They know nothing of war production. Let them try to turn their automobile factories into aircraft plants. They'll learn soon enough that building planes requires far more than assembly lines. What Göring failed to recognize was that in Detroit, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. The former General Motors president, now working for $1 a year as Roosevelt's production chief, was directing the largest industrial transformation in history. Within 4 years, American factories would not just meet the impossible goal of 50,000 planes, but nearly double it, approaching 100,000 aircraft annually, while simultaneously supplying 2 separate war fronts across 2 oceans. The declaration that drew German contempt had come on May 16, 1940, as German panzers raced through France. Addressing Congress, Roosevelt announced, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." The response was doubt, even from allies. In 1939, U.S. factories had built only 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps owned just 1,700 combat planes, many outdated. Yet Roosevelt demanded a 14-fold increase. William Knudsen became the man to make it real. When asked who could accomplish such an impossible task, advisor Bernard Baruch replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." Knudsen had given up his $300,000 salary to serve his adopted country, applying the principles of automotive mass production to aircraft manufacturing. The transformation began at once. By December 1941, U.S. factories were producing 2,000 aircraft per month, a 20-fold increase in just 2 years. Ford announced construction of a massive bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded in Seattle. Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of new workers. The arsenal of democracy was roaring to life. Germany's dismissal of American capabilities rested on arrogance and racial ideology. General Friedrich von Bötticher, Wehrmacht military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, sent accurate reports describing U.S. mobilization. His December 1940 cable warned, "American war production will reach unimaginable heights." Berlin ignored him, dismissing the warnings as defeatist exaggeration. When Bötticher met Hitler in February 1939 to discuss U.S. potential, the Führer raged about supposed American racial degeneracy instead of listening to intelligence. Hitler insisted Americans were half Judaized, half negrified, incapable of sustained warfare. This blindness proved disastrous. The prejudice infected every level. Luftwaffe analysts dismissed reports of women entering aircraft plants as evidence of American weakness, unable to imagine democratic mobilization outpacing totalitarian command. When told factories ran 3 shifts, they assumed it was exaggeration. Nazi ideology simply could not comprehend American reality. Ford's Willow Run plant became the ultimate symbol of ambition. Built on farmland starting April 18, 1941, it grew into the world's largest factory under one roof, 3.5 million square feet, with a mile-long assembly line. Ford production chief Charles Sorensen promised a bomber an hour when other plants managed 1 per day. At first, the results were disastrous. The first completed bomber, in September 1942, had to be rebuilt entirely. Quality control failures reached 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run was producing only 56 bombers a month, far below expectations. Critics mocked it as "Will it run?" But Ford engineers pressed on. They broke down the B-24's 488-193 parts into sub-assemblies, introduced hydraulic riveting, prefabricated wiring harnesses, and a moving assembly line. They managed to incorporate 578 design changes in 1943, alone without halting output. By September 1943, monthly production had risen to 148 bombers. By December, 365. The true breakthrough came in April 1944, when Willow Run rolled out Ford 28 B-24s, 1 every 63 minutes, around the clock. This single factory outproduced Germany's entire aviation industry. German pilots were the first to recognize America's overwhelming production edge. During the Tunisia campaign, Major Johannes Steinhoff, commander of JG-77, observed in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." The realization only deepened as 1943 progressed. January 27th marked the first U.S. air raid on Germany itself, 64 bombers striking Wilhelmshaven. By October, during Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the Americans could lose 60 B-17s and replace them within 2 weeks. The arithmetic was becoming undeniable. During Big Week, February 20th to 25, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces launched 3 Feindesbomber sorties against German aircraft production. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, but more importantly, around 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland reported to Göring that Germany was losing 200 fighters each month while producing only 1,000. By contrast, the United States was building 2,500 fighters monthly while losing just 400. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's top aces with 220 victories, described a January 1944 mission over Brunswick. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was hopeless. By 1944, American aircraft production had reached staggering levels. That year alone, U.S. factories built 96,007 planes, 1648 4-engine bombers, 35,043 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. In a single year, the U.S. outproduced Germany's entire wartime output of roughly 94,677 aircraft. And the gap wasn't just numbers. Each American bomber carried 13 50-caliber machine guns with thousands of rounds. German fighters, increasingly launched with only partial ammunition loads. U.S. bombers had powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and modern navigation equipment, while German aircraft often lacked working radios. By May 1944, Boeing's Seattle Plant 2 was turning out 16 B-17s daily. Douglas Aircraft, which had employed only 68 people in 1936, now had 167,000 workers across 9 plants. North American Aviation was producing 500 P-51 Mustangs per month. Lockheed rolled out 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, incorporating 2,127 combat-driven modifications. Supporting industries matched this pace. General Motors built 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Packard manufactured 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlins. Alcoa's aluminum production rose 600%. Dow Chemicals magnesium output skyrocketed from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million. The transformation of the workforce shattered Nazi assumptions. Women, less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, made up 65% by 1943, over 310,000 in total. At Douglas Long Beach, 22 of 41,262 employees were women. Roseville Monroe, the original Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. At Douglas, women inspectors cut defect rates from 3.2% to 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools for smaller hands, which unexpectedly improved efficiency. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced fatigue, while better designed workstations decreased injuries. German intelligence dismissed female labor as desperation, predicting collapsing quality. Instead, precision soared. Women excelled at detailed work, wiring, instrumentation, and inspection. Their participation reflected democratic strength, not weakness. As American production soared, Germany retreated into fantasy. Göring authorized the Jaeger program in February 1944, scattering production across 729 underground facilities, powered by slave labor. The Mittelwerk complex alone held 60,000 prisoners under horrific conditions, with 20,000 dying. These underground factories produced more defects than aircraft. Sabotage was rampant, transportation delays common, and quality control non-existent. The entire Mittelwerk output produced fewer engines monthly than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation raced ahead. Boeing developed modular B-29 construction across 4 facilities with fully interchangeable parts. The pressurized B-29, costing $65,000 each, incorporated technology Germany never matched beyond prototypes. By early 1945, U.S. factories were producing 100 B-29s every month. June 6, 1944 day showcased the peak of American production. The invasion employed 11,590 Allied aircraft against just German sorties, a 36-to-1 advantage. This wasn't mere tactical superiority, it was industrial annihilation. Between January and May 1944, U.S. bombers dropped 145,000 tons on German targets, more than Germany dropped on Britain during the entire war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in a single day, using more planes than Germany's entire transport fleet ever possessed. By December 1944, individual raids sent out 1,200 bombers, escorted by 900 fighters. P-51 Mustangs had the range to reach Poland, the performance to match any enemy, and were produced in such numbers that losses were irrelevant. German pilots called them Indians, swarming everywhere at once. As defeat loomed, even Nazi leaders admitted the catastrophe. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises of Luftwaffe superiority now seem criminal delusions. We fight the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric." Rommel warned before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for everyone we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will come with such material superiority that no position can hold." Even Hitler conceded to Speer. In January 1945, we should have listened to Boetticher's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands. Albert Speer later testified that American bombing cut German output by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He admitted plainly, the American attacks, which followed a definite system against industrial targets, caused the breakdown of German armaments. Germany's Me-262 jet fighter, operational in mid-1944, was a genuine innovation, 100 mph faster than any Allied aircraft. Hitler and Göring hoped this wonder weapon would restore air superiority despite overwhelming odds, but only 430 Me-262s were built in total, and never more than 200 were operational at once. Engines required overhaul every 10 hours. Critical materials grew scarce in Germany, forcing inferior substitutions. Meanwhile, the United States had already begun jet development in 1942, while the Bell, P-59, underperformed compared to German jets. Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, superior to any German design, entered production before the war ended. America's vast industrial base allowed it to pursue multiple technologies at once, a luxury Germany could never match. The contrast captured the essence of the production war. German breakthroughs in jet technology meant little against America's ability to build thousands of conventional fighters while simultaneously developing the next generation of aircraft. In total war, quality without quantity was meaningless. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by elements of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division, marked the beginning of his reckoning with reality. At first he was defiant. During interrogation at Augsburg, he insisted German technology had been superior, overwhelmed only by numbers. But after his transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, the facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, interrogations grew more intensive. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler recorded a series of interviews in which Göring gradually acknowledged American supremacy. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring admitted, "but the execution exceeded my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber fleet at its peak. It was incomprehensible." He was especially astonished by U.S. logistics, your ability to supply forces across 2 oceans while sustaining domestic production. "This was beyond our imagination. We couldn't even supply forces 500 miles from Germany. You supplied armies 5,000 miles from America." At Nuremberg, prosecutors confronted Göring with overwhelming evidence of U.S. production dominance. Charts showed America producing more aircraft in a single month of 1944 than Germany managed in an entire year. Films of Willow Run's assembly lines were shown as prosecutors listed the German cities destroyed by bombers built in that one factory. On March 14, 1946, Göring admitted in testimony, "I believe the economic and technical potential of the United States to be unusually great. particularly the Air Force, but I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible, prison psychologist Gustave Gilbert noted. Göring's obsession with production statistics. He repeatedly recalculated ratios, comparing individual U.S. factories to all of Germany's output. Willow Run especially haunted him. He referred to it as that damned factory that broke our backs. When confronted with figures showing America had produced 8 to 12,6 Fumbis, aircraft engines versus Germany's 241,675, he fell silent, unable to respond. The mathematics of defeat were undeniable. Even today, the scope of the transformation remains staggering. From 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, the United States produced 59 by war's end, 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other aircraft. This represented not just overwhelming numbers, but systemic superiority in every aspect of production. At its peak, 2 million Americans worked in aircraft manufacturing, a workforce that reflected unprecedented diversity. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and the elderly. Democratic mobilization achieved what authoritarian command could not. Voluntary cooperation that surpassed forced labor in every metric. The men and women who entered factories in 1941, knowing nothing about aviation, emerged in 1945 as the world's most skilled aerospace workforce. They didn't just assemble aircraft. They transformed manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control, pioneered for bomber production, became standard industrial practice worldwide. Automation principles tested at Willow Run reshaped global industry. The engineers who designed bomber assembly lines later built the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24s raised the children who walked on the moon. The production miracle didn't end with the war. It launched the American century. Financially, it defied conventional economics. Aircraft production cost $45 billion in 1940s dollars, about $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet instead of bankrupting the nation, war production created unmatched prosperity. The unemployment of the Depression vanished completely. Between 1940 and 1945, personal income doubled. Workers themselves financed much of the expansion through war bonds. Willow Run employees alone purchased $45 million in bonds, effectively funding their own factory. Germany, by contrast, consumed 40% of its industrial capacity for aircraft production by 1944, yet produced less than half of America's output. Reliance on slave labor proved catastrophic. Sabotage was rampant, quality collapsed, and productivity per German worker fell after 1943. In the same period, U.S. productivity rose 300%. The infrastructure created for war became the backbone of post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters built for bombers provided material for suburban homes. Chemical plants that refined aviation fuel now produced plastics for consumer goods. Machine tool factories that armed aircraft plants retooled American industry for global dominance. Beyond sheer volume, America achieved organizational brilliance. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies with remarkable efficiency. IBM punch card systems tracked millions of components across countless suppliers. MIT's Radiation Laboratory, with 4,000 scientists, developed navigation systems that gave U.S. bombers all-weather capability. Adaptability proved just as decisive as scale. When combat revealed the B-17's vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing installed chin turrets within 60 days. When the Pacific demanded longer range, Consolidated modified B-24s without halting production. German changes took months or even years. American modifications took weeks. U.S. aircraft evolved continuously, informed by real combat. Information flowed from the battlefield to the production line in days. Engineers and workers directly integrated frontline feedback. German aircraft, built in underground factories by forced labor, remained static. The democratic exchange of information proved superior to rigid authoritarian hierarchy. On October 15, 1946, few hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he gave his clearest acknowledgement of what truly decided the war: production power. The Americans triumphed not through superior soldiers, but through superior factories. We were not beaten in the field but overwhelmed in industry. The very nation we mocked as only capable of consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under mountains of steel and aluminum. His final words to psychologist Gilbert were just as telling. We declared war on a sleeping industrial giant. Once it awoke, our fate was sealed. They didn't simply outproduce us. They reinvented production itself. Every element of their system proved stronger than ours. That night, Göring took his own life, but his last admissions remain history's judgment on the production war. The Reich's air marshal, who had once ridiculed American industry, died knowing that a single U.S. factory had outbuilt his entire Luftwaffe over the course of the war. Military historians widely agree that American production was the decisive factor in the Allied victory. Without such overwhelming material dominance, D-Day would have been impossible, the bombing campaign unsustainable, and the Pacific War unwinnable. As air war historian Richard Overy observed, victory was determined not by courage or strategy, but by the weight of material. The Allies prevailed because they buried their enemies beneath a flood of weapons and machines. The statistics confirm this beyond doubt. By 1944, the United States alone was building more military aircraft than the rest of the world, combined, Axis and Allied together. This wasn't a small edge, but a staggering gulf. Germany didn't merely lose, it was crushed. But the meaning of this production miracle extended far beyond battlefield victory. It demonstrated democracy's superiority over dictatorship, liberty's advantage over tyranny, and the strength of voluntary cooperation over forced labor. The millions who made this transformation possible were not slaves or conscripts, but free citizens united in purpose. Göring's disdain for American capacity proved history's most catastrophic misjudgment. His failure to grasp the power of democratic industry doomed the Third Reich. Before the first bombs ever fell on German cities, the leap from producing 3,000 planes a year to 100,000 showed that free societies, when threatened, could accomplish the impossible. Roosevelt's call for 50,000 aircraft seemed absurd. American workers didn't just achieve it. They doubled it while fighting across 2 oceans at the same time. The lesson remains vital. Today, underestimating free nations because they value peace, or misjudging their productive power because they choose prosperity over conquest, risks disaster. In 1940, America appeared unready for war. By 1944, it had become an unstoppable industrial titan. The arsenal of democracy proved that factory lines could be as decisive as front lines, that workers could be as vital as soldiers, and that industrial organization could decide wars as surely as military strategy. Göring realized this truth too late, at the cost of his country's destruction. From mocking Roosevelt's production goals in 1940 to his execution in 1946, Göring's journey mirrored Nazi Germany's collapse. His contempt for American manufacturing became the epitaph of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology for strength and ignored the cold reality of industrial mathematics. The Luftwaffe's commander, who laughed at U.S. production claims, died knowing America had built more planes in 1944, alone than Germany made in the entire war. His scorn for democratic capacity became history's most costly joke, paid for in total defeat. The U.S. built 295 through 959 military aircraft, Germany only 94,677. But the real triumph lay not just in numbers, but in method. Free workers outproduced slaves. Democratic coordination outpaced totalitarian command. A diverse nation of immigrants and citizens, united by shared purpose, achieved the impossible. The B-24s rolling out of Willow Run every 63 minutes weren't merely aircraft. They were symbols of freedom's strength. Every rivet driven by a woman who had been a housewife only months earlier, every engine built by a teenager who had left school to serve, every wing assembled by those once excluded by poverty or prejudice, all proved that free people could bury tyranny beneath sheer productive might. Göring had scoffed at Roosevelt's promise of 50,000 planes a year. America answered with twice that number, reshaping world history in the process. His laughter became the echo of catastrophic miscalculation, the fatal underestimation of democracy's arsenal by a man who understood neither democracy nor production. In the end, both combined to bury him in the empire he served. Under 300,000 American aircraft, the most decisive verdict in the war of production.